Archaeology, the study of old things. The concept of dating within archaeology can relate to a number of different methods. You have radiocarbon, dendrochronology, amino acid geochronology, etc. One very rough form of dating is to just analyse the sedimentary layers, determining which one correlates to which time period. A layer of dark earth in London might mean it is from the Roman period, for example. Another comparatively simple method is to just observe the use of materials. For example, a rough brick made of baked clay might, for instance, be indicative of a structure from the late Neolithic, and by the process of elimination one can safely assume that the structure is not from any time before the invention of the kiln. That same logic can be applied to digital spaces with their own digital history, and much like the last video, the example here would be Minecraft. Just as a warning, I'm going to say the word digital about 200 times in this video, to the point where it no longer sounds like a word to me, so just keep that in mind. So just for some background information, if you don't know, in Minecraft one can host or join a near endless amount of multiplayer worlds, some having been created over a decade ago for up to hundreds if not thousands of players at any one time. Considering the game is now 11 years old, it has been regularly updated every few months or so, and a lot of this content comes in the form of building materials. Stone, bricks, terracotta, certain types of wood, all of these are added to the game at various points in time. Theoretically, if you were to find a structure built out of, let's say, terracotta, which was added in 2013, you would be able to rightfully assume that it was not built, or at least was not heavily modified, until after said year. This is the exact same logic as that previous example with the clay bricks in real life, admittedly much more simplified, as was the same with the last video, when I compared real life things to this video game. So what does this all mean? Well, in reality, something old has a certain air to it, doesn't it? An aura of antiquity. When you see a marble statue in a museum, it's quite impressive, right? Even if the actual item or structure itself isn't the most wonderful looking thing in the world, it is still really cool to see something which is so old. In that same regard, although condensed into years instead of centuries, seeing something old on Minecraft brings a similar feeling. Say you are out doing your own thing in one of these multiplayer worlds, and you run into a castle that somebody had built. As you explore the castle, and look through whatever gear they had, or examine the layout of their base, you can begin to work out when it was made judging by the material, the build style, and similar factors. And that is to some degree a digital version of, say, unearthing Tutankhamun's tomb in the 1920s. You are a digital archaeologist unearthing the real history of something that somebody else made in a digital space. But let's go even further than that. Say somebody wrote messages in their base before they abandoned it, perhaps a log of the events from the creation of their castle to the very end. Although these signs and words don't exist in the real world, the stories did at some point. This was a real person playing a video game years ago, and they have left an imprint, and from that you can glean a sense of sentimentality, I suppose. Likewise, say for example this quote-unquote ancient player had a sword they crafted the first day they started playing, and then hung it on the wall sometime in 2012 when the ability to hang items as decoration was added. There, this sword sat for another 8 years before being discovered by a would-be explorer. Once again, although this isn't a real item nor does it have any tangible weight, the fact something this old, relative of course to the game's lifespan, still exists by this point is a lot like the status of a real-world relic. It is a digital item, but with real-world sentimentality and prowess. I think that's something quite special really, and you don't get that with most games. So let's look at some more examples, widen our scope. So, moving back to my point on multiplayer worlds in Minecraft, and more importantly being able to find very old player-made structures, what else can you piece together through examining the environment? Changes in terrain from craters from a battle perhaps? The remnants of deforestation efforts which leave behind clearly empty clearings? How about sections of a base which are rebuilt with different materials following damage? Can you spot architectural designs which are copied from a YouTube video, for example? And if so, can you use the release date of that YouTube video to work out a rough time frame of when this build was made? I suppose then the argument could be made that when comparing the real and digital worlds, that YouTubers who pioneer these architectural styles within Minecraft form a similar niche to real-world architects. If YouTuber X designs a style of building and it spreads through the digital space as more and more people follow it, is that not so different to Romano-Gothic architecture taking off? Even if this information is not clearly telegraphed via signs or even in some cases in-game books, it is still sometimes obvious, and piecing together the digital history of a place can be at times just as rewarding as doing the same thing in real life. It's also much easier because you don't have to go out into the rain. Obviously the two aren't directly comparable, nor am I saying Minecraft has the capacity to create digital histories as complex as the real world, but the basic concept is definitely there. Moving back to how I mentioned in-game books earlier, you can actually write up to 50 pages within one of these books in Minecraft. You can then publish them, make copies, and as of recently, place them on lecterns for multiple people to read at once. Let's say, hypothetically, someone wrote a book detailing the history of their fortnight-long experience on a Minecraft world, and then this book was discovered years later by someone else. There, they have found something akin to a historical record, an annal of history, perhaps. Items holding digital sentimentality also extend to the aforementioned book example. Somebody could write you something, perhaps a friend on the internet or someone like that, and then they could give you that book and you never hear from them again. That's a memory right there. That is an imprint, a footprint that they have left behind. Before I go on to the next section of the video, I'll just briefly divulge some terminology for those of the audience who aren't fellow epic gamers. So, on Minecraft, these multiplayer worlds are colloquially referred to as servers because they are hosted on servers. Some are really big, both in terms of how many players are on it and how large the file is. Some servers also have different rules, and the one I'm going to be talking about is an Anarchy Server, which means actually that there are no rules whatsoever. You can do whatever you like. If you want to go around blowing other people up, you can. And in Anarchy servers, that is where, for me, you find the best examples of both digital history and digital archaeology. As a case study, much like how somebody would use, Torksea in Lincolnshire to talk about Viking army tactics, I will be using one such Anarchy server to discuss digital archaeology. That is 2b2t. 2b2t is the oldest Anarchy server in Minecraft, and has been around for nearly a full decade as of the end of 2020. It is so vast now that it is apparently stored in terabytes, and has had over its 10-year lifespan nearly 1 million total players. These players come from all around the world, and enter this virtual space with no rules, and can do whatever they like. If they want to build a base, they can. If they want to go and wage war, they can. The options at their disposal are limitless, and as such, the digital footprint one of these players can leave behind can come in many different shapes and sizes. And considering 2b2t has been around for 10 years almost, which is almost the entire length that the game itself has been around, the wealth of these historical sites that exist is pretty groundbreaking for a digital space. Say you were to join 2b2t, you could explore this server for years and still not discover even half the archaeological sites that have been left behind by other players such as yourself. All the bases somebody at some point made and then forgot about, all the events which happened in this digital space and were then washed away by the digital winds of time. Some YouTubers have dedicated their internet careers to composing timelines and educational videos discussing the events of this Anarchy server, from tours of historic sites to full-on year-by-year descriptions. It really is quite impressive, and you'd be surprised by just how much research can go into one of these videos, tracking down the people involved even if they haven't been online and playing, just to ask for eyewitness accounts, or even just piecing together what happened at a specific historical building by doing what I mentioned earlier, observing what materials were used, the building styles, etc. coming back to that aspect of digital sentimentality, you can also find that a lot of that on the 2B2T. I apologise in advance for starting off with a sad example, but in 2019 the internet personality known as Etika, real name Desmond, tragically passed away. About a week or so before he did, however, he wrote a book on Minecraft about 7 pages long, just a message to his internet friend on 2B2T. After his passing, that book is now a permanent record of the impact of someone who is no longer with us. Another more personal example for me would be a vaguely Arabic-style hospital I built in honour of my granddad on the day he passed away. I even have a sign commemorating the game of Tiddlywinks, which we used to play when I was about 5 years old. This hospital isn't a real place, but when I walk past it in this digital environment, I think of a real memory. That right there is the best example for me of how somewhere digitally can have real-world weight, be that from its age, its significance, or its content. Sticking with something else I myself have made, this right here is the first item ever created on an archaeology-themed multiplayer world that I myself run. It is extremely old if you compare it to the lifespan of everything else on this server, being made over a year ago to this day, and thus it has a lot of digital sentimentality. It, among many other similar relics, so to speak, are stored within a museum which I built. It also contains a timeline of events and a collection of annals of history. For these books, I was directly inspired by work I was doing for my dissertation. From reading the Annals of St. Bertin, the Annals of Fulda, the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, some of which record the history of the Carolingian Empire, I was inspired to take that same dedication that these historical scholars had for the recording of events and transfer that into a digital space. As such, every single event that has ever happened since the creation of this multiplayer world on the 1st of April 2019, even very insignificant or small occurrences, have been recorded in these books. As of the time of making this video, I am up to the 27th book, and each book contains roughly 50 pages, and each page has roughly 256 characters. So that's about 1,350 digital pages, all of which having 256 characters on, which I've written over the space of a year and a half, now all stored in a museum for new players to read about the history of this online space. But what does that even achieve beyond just being a hobby and, more importantly, a massive time sink? Well, say you enter this museum, read a random page about a base somebody built in, I don't know, October 2019, with details giving away a rough location. You then travel to said location, find the abandoned remains of this base, and boom, there's some digital history, with a record of what went down at this location already written on the day it happened. Much like in real life, no longer will Minecraft suffer from a digital dark age. Everything is stored inside a virtual annal of history. But what's this all been for, really? Well, for me it's just kind of an experiment. It's saying that just because an item doesn't exist in the real world, it still has history. These digital spaces, particularly in sandbox games like Minecraft, are just so interesting for exploring the impact that someone can leave behind in this virtual space, and the emotional attachments one can have for something that doesn't even exist. No matter which way you put it, for me, that is the essence of history, and therefore archaeology. I really think it's quite interesting, and in the next video I'll be going fully in depth on the archaeology themed Minecraft server that me and my friends run, and be fully detailing the timeline of events, if that's your kind of thing. Thank you for listening. Cheers.